You know, since my videos tend to go back and forth, and one I'll be criticizing a Graham Hancock detractor, and the next one I'll be criticizing a Graham Hancock supporter, I get asked a lot, hey man, what do you think about all this? Do you just play devil's advocate? You just here to crap all over the place and not say anything? And well, I guess I'll go ahead and, I got 25,000 subscribers now, so I guess I'll go ahead and do a 25,000 subscriber special and let you know what I really think about all this stuff. And these are subject to change. Those of you who watch me all the time, you're well aware that I'm going to be like, boom, 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 when new data comes in or just a new opinion shows up in my lap or something else. All kinds of things can get me to change my opinion on things. I don't have something hard and fast that I hold on to, like Ben and his vase, for example. There's nothing like that for me. As a matter of fact, even if I had something that was that intriguing to me, I would drop it soon and go on to something else. It's just kind of how I wouldn't forget about it, but I just kind of, what else is cool? That's just how I am with this stuff. So anyway, in this video, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lay out for you what I think about Atlantis and lost civilization and all that crap, what my opinion is on it all. And there won't be very much hedge protecting of myself here, or bet hedging, that's the words I was looking for. I'm not going to be standing here going, well, in my opinion, I think that this is all my opinion. So enjoy it or not. No longer can certain individuals claim that I just dodge like a boxer or whatever. I still don't understand exactly how somebody could come up with that, but okay, whatever. Let's go ahead and discuss the entire thing of what I think anyway about Atlantis or the lost civilization or however you wanted to call it out here. Hi, my name's Dan and welcome to Debunking. Now the first thing to keep in mind is the current scientific consensus is that about 200,000 years ago all of humanity was in one place. All of the humans knew each other. Every single human interacted with every other human. One language and one culture. Now this rapidly changed with people leaving Africa and spreading across the globe over time, but the first place, ground zero for the emergence of humanity, that place and time would have been a learning center. A very impromptu learning center, but this new ability, symbolic thought on a higher level than the world had ever seen, would be evident in the increased creations and discoveries. And as the people spread out, many of these first discoveries would become part of humanity, a ubiquitous part of our culture. Now, I mention this because most academics wouldn't argue with what I just said there. But think about the implications of that. The foundations of our language, of our culture, of a lot of our basic rudimentary technology and skill set all came out in this little idea. All the things that separated us from the other primates and stuff probably all came up in a couple hundred years. And one of the things that I'm going to posit that came up there that a lot of academics would argue with me on is a boat. I believe that the first time that some early human saw a twig with an ant on it, mind blown, recognition made, we can float across a body of water by getting on a big enough twig. I don't think that's crazy, even though I know some academics will think that's quite a stretch. I think that people figured that one out really, really quick. Before the bow and arrow, I would say. This leads into my idea about a lost civilization, my favorite Atlantis theory. Some people throughout history have been seafaring people. One landmass may be the primary home island, but the people are all over the area, using boats to move around the region. For instance, the Polynesians had a similar lifestyle in recent history. Now, I believe a group of people, or more likely three groups of people that existed like this, lived far further back in time than mainstream academia accepts using this technology. Now, I know immediately skeptics will be asking about DNA, but look into it a little bit. I'm not trying to make this video too data heavy, but there is anomalous DNA all over the world that proves different cultures came into contact with each other. And that's not even the right way of wording it. It's not different cultures. It's different people from different regions, different individual groups of people, but not different cultures per se. Look at the margin of error for DNA studies, especially when you start going back 5,000 to 10,000 years, man. They really, really don't know. They can't use DNA to pull out a timeline and say this people were here 5,000 years ago. They were here between 6,000 and 16,000 years ago is more like the kind of numbers you'll get into. But again, I don't want to make this too data heavy. You can go look into that yourself. But if you're going to be all like, oh, we have no DNA for that, miss me with that shit because you ain't done no fucking research. Anyway, these people, my hypothetical seafarers, I believe they developed better astronomy and math because they found it more useful than your average hunter-gatherer did. Learning to find the other islands you frequent requires some means of navigating consistently. Stars and math have been shown to do that job pretty good. As a side effect, this caused their astronomy to be strong enough to supplant local traditions in many cases, making their take on the stars a more popular one in areas that they frequented. This was intertwined with religious beliefs, and therefore similar religious ideas followed in their influence as well. Now, often these people would settle and move inland, and one way that they could keep their skill set more or less intact when it comes to a lot of things they needed to do for sailing, and also to announce their presence in a profound way, would be to build these megalithic structures. And now bear with me for a second, because it might sound counterintuitive that stacking big rocks it helps them remember how to sail, but it requires the complicated mathematics, it requires skillful use of ropes and levers and knots, and it requires teamwork. So all these things together, like fundamental, powerful teamwork. So all these things together, I think, may well have been something that they used it was just kind of a natural extension of those same skills when they hit the dry ground. Eventually the cataclysm hits. And you know me, whether or not it's a comet or a flood or whatever, it doesn't matter. Talking about big waves, right? So waves batter the islands, the world gets shook up, and most cultures handle it better than my hypothetical seafarers. Still, most of them had it pretty bad too. The records in most myths claim that humanity was almost wiped out and there's only a few people surviving in each area. Now, obviously, each culture wouldn't know how many survivors in the neighboring regions there are, so accounts of one or two families surviving seem more like locals discerning the event as best they could than an accurate depiction of what really happened. But the survivors of most of these areas could return to their normal lives pretty quickly as long as the same flora and fauna showed up, or similar enough flora and fauna showed up. For the most part, it looks like they kind of got lucky and the really, really big stuff died off, and so they didn't have to deal with the big old, giant sloths that were chomping on humans potentially and whatnot. But for the island-hopping peoples, they would have an entirely new problem. Their ability to travel around required islands to stop at for supplies, islands that may or may not exist now, and almost certainly wouldn't have extra supplies if they did exist and had survivors at all. Like any culture faced with extinction, these people found themselves looking for ways to pass their culture along, to spread their ideas to the rest of the world after their time was gone. The ones who lived on islands and managed to survive, they probably left because they had to. There may well have been nothing left where they were, or no ability to maintain the civilization that they once had. Now, others probably planned civilizing expeditions, colonizing projects meant to establish new homes for the seafarers. Part of this required careful negotiations with the locals. Odds are a flood was a lot harder on the seafaring people than it was on the people that lived on the larger land masses, so showing up all sea peoples of the Bronze Age style was pretty much out. They would have been driven into the sea and destroyed forever. Instead, they presented themselves as a benevolent teacher people, there to show them how to build the proper temples, use the proper ropes to tie the proper knots, and follow the proper stars, and by extension then use the proper rituals to get into the afterlife, which gave these fish people a lot of power, and they ended up being recorded in numerous cultures throughout the world as kind of civilizer gods that came from the sea. Now, teaching the entire population all of these skills would be silly. The skills were treated as the valuables that they were and distributed accordingly. The king or chief of a people and his groups of allies would be taught the major secrets, but not all. Allowing the nobles to maintain power over their people, but letting the islanders turn to gods have a trick or two they could still do. The locals could only hope to learn from them, giving both a degree of power in the time and place. This led to a sort of cult of secret knowledge in many areas, people hiding secrets passed down from the early days. Some of the earliest craftsmen came from these groups, and the tradition of guarding a craft's secrets with one's life likely had its origins in these long ago days. Do we not still hear talk of the secrets of the masons, the bricklayers, the stoneworkers, the people with construction tools for a symbol? In time, the legend of these civilizer gods took on a strong symbolic meaning. A king who could trace his line to one of these gods was truly worthy of the throne. An engineer who could utilize many massive stones in the highest degree of accuracy was showing a direct link to these god kings, especially if this person could link this perfection on the ground with the perfection in the sky. This happened in just a few generations, in my opinion, and planted the seeds of the megalithic construction projects we see later in the record. But I do believe that many of these have the fingerprints of those ancient seafarers. The cult of secret knowledge was, and may still be, very widespread. A set of teachings that are only part of the puzzle, with some personal discovery or maybe even more information gleaned from elsewhere, a sort of figuring it out, it seems to have taken place. We see similar symbolism associated with similar edifices across the sea from one another. In different times, we see the symbolism pop up and then fall out of favor after a short period. So when a person's set to building these large structures, they seem to have had certain ideas on board in forming their projects. Ideas about utilizing the structure to connect sky and ground, and this being attached to immortality of the soul. The processional numbers showing up in the records seem to support this. All across the world we see the same numbers used in religious stories and buildings. It seems possible to me, even likely, that this is part of a shared tradition, a piece of a set of ideas we can still recognize today. Here's a picture of a Masonic tapestry. The symbolism may seem mundane, but it does take on a new meaning if you think of comets destroying the world and humanity rebuilding, doesn't it? This kind of thing happens all the time, where symbolism can be informed by some esoteric knowledge and all of a sudden it takes on a whole new meaning and you recognize the symbol for what it was. Now, this ancient rock cutting cult that I'm talking about here, I believe that they definitely did this, and I believe that this is why it cropped up over and over throughout history in similar ways, far apart through time and space. I'm not a big believer in ancient high technology. I do believe that we, as a rule, underestimate the abilities of the ancient when it comes to technology, but I don't think their abilities came close to ours, and I certainly doubt they outstripped our abilities. But they certainly were far better at working stone than one would think unless you really look into it. Stone was the premier building material for making weapons or long-lasting buildings for a very long time, so it does make sense. But this doesn't explain away the enigmatic nature of some of these sites. Moving gigantic stones over hundreds of miles of uneven ground is not an easy task, and many of these sites have dozens of massive stones. Now, I know right now some of you are already typing Wally Wallington into my comment sections, and yeah, man, that guy did a lot of cool work. Do not get me wrong, I have nothing but respect for him, but when we're talking about people dragging stones over hundreds of miles of uneven terrain, and you're going to compare it with the dude on a concrete slab spending an hour setting everything up and then pushing a rock in a circle in a controlled environment. I mean, come on, man. That's like, the metaphors are just countless. One is basically a laboratory and the other one is in the field. Can you do the same thing in both? Of course not. So that's so silly to me. And again, I'm not a proponent of ancient high technology, but the Wally Wallington method is not going to get rocks across the jungle and up a mountain. So just miss me with that stupid shit too. But this is why I make videos, because one of the reasons I make videos, because you, on the one hand, we've got people saying, the only way these rocks can be moved with is sonics or magic, and then the other side, we've got people saying, oh no, man, this dude figured it out in his backyard. What are you even worried about? Nothing to see here. Somewhere between those two takes, there's a real mystery there, and I'm all about it. Now, as for where they came from, where was the fabled city of Atlantis? I tend to think it was a group of islands, like the Polynesians. As a matter of fact, their ancestors would be my primary candidate, or some group like that. And I would think like the concentric rings of dirt and earth, that are dirt and water that's described in Plato's account. I think that might be some bastardized version of like land, water, land, because it's a group of islands. And, again, the DNA is really goofy with these guys, the Polynesians. It's hard for academics to pin down where they came from or any of that. So it's quite possible that these guys were, running around the area and breeding with a lot of different people back in those days, and that we're looking at it now, and the academics are just kind of confused by it. Again, DNA stuff is goofy. Look into the margins of error and stuff. If they don't have a framework of history to pin it to, man, they have a hell of a time having any sort of timeline going on whatsoever at all. Now, also perhaps there was like a center islands to this whole thing, would be in my opinion, and like Easter Island or Rapa Nui being like a world naval kind of thing for the Polynesian people, or the Easter Island people at least. That is a candidate. It's possible. It is possible that, it was wiped out a bajillion years ago, 10,000 years ago or whatever, and that people went back there to resettle it eventually in the more recent times, and that's why we show such recent things there. But maybe if we dug way down, we'd find that there was stuff going on there a lot longer before we previously imagined, or some of us previously imagined. I don't have the money to pay for somebody to do it, but other people might. So I doubt it'll happen in my lifetime, which will leave this in the realm of speculation and the realm of alternate history, but I'm okay with that. Some people aren't. I am, personally. Now, I know that this isn't the best Atlantis bro story of all time. It's better than Disney, but it's still not, it doesn't have lasers, it doesn't have high technology, it doesn't have aliens. But I do personally think that there are signs of a civilization going around and touching on the globe. There are things that make a lot of sense. And I'm not going to get into all the detail here, but I've touched on it a little bit. And anyway, this is basically what I believe. So if you're wanting to pick at me, now you got a video that'll give you some good, nice, easy spots to do it where I haven't hedged my bets very well at all. Thank you very much for watching this far. Especially appreciate my Patreon supporters for helping take care of my stupid ass when I make videos like this. And thanks to all of you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it, and we will see you all next time.